What happens when a man who once had nothing rises to the top, only to make a purchase that stuns the entire world? Meet Nathan Cole, a man who went from sleeping on the streets to becoming a billionaire. But when it was time to make his first major purchase, he didn't choose a mansion, a private jet, or a luxury yacht. Instead, he made a decision that no one saw coming. What shocking truth from his past drove him to this decision? And how did this single purchase change countless lives forever? This is more than just a rags to riches story. It's a tale of redemption, second chances, and a billionaire who refused to forget where he came from. Stay tuned, because this is one story you won't want to miss. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe the channel so we can bring you more stories like this. Now, let's get into it. It had been years since Nathan Cole had slept under a bridge, his stomach gnawing at him with hunger, his body trembling from the cold. He still remembered those nights vividly. The way the wind howled through the empty streets, the way people passed him by without so much as a glance. Back then, he'd been nothing more than a ghost, invisible to the world. But today the world couldn't ignore him if it tried. Nathan Cole was now a billionaire, and he was about to make his first major purchase. Reporters swarmed outside as he stepped into the towering glass skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. Cameras flashed, journalists shouted his name, eager to get a statement from the man who had gone from homeless to unfathomably rich in just a few years. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What was Nathan Cole going to do with his fortune? Rumors had been flying for weeks. Some speculated he would buy a private island. Others believed he'd pour his money into luxury cars, yachts, or sprawling estates. The Wall Street elite whispered about a potential corporate takeover, but no one had a clue what his first real purchase would be. Nathan said nothing as he walked past the cameras, his face unreadable. He stepped into the sleek, modern office of Langston Realty, the most prestigious firm in New York. The receptionist, a woman in her mid-30s with polished nails and a practiced smile, greeted him with forced enthusiasm. He could see the curiosity flicker in her eyes. "Mr. Cole, welcome to Langston Realty. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you." Nathan nodded and followed her down a long corridor lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. Sunlight reflected off the towering buildings outside, a city built by those who had always belonged to the world of wealth. Once, he had thought he would never be a part of it. They reached the executive suite, where a distinguished man in a tailored suit rose to greet him. "Nathan Cole," the man said, extending his hand. "David Whitmore. It is an honor to meet you." Nathan shook his hand firmly. "Let's get to business. You know what I'm here for." David chuckled, motioning for Nathan to take a seat. "Straight to the point. I respect that. Yes, we have everything prepared, but I have to say, when I first heard of your request, I was surprised." Nathan leaned back in his chair, his expression impassive. "I imagine a lot of people will be—" David tapped on his tablet, pulling up the necessary documents. "You're absolutely certain about this purchase? Once it's done, there's no turning back." Nathan glanced at the contract on the table, then back at David. His lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." David slid the papers across the table. "Then let's make history." As Nathan picked up the pen, the world outside waited, completely unaware of the bombshell that was about to drop. Nathan pressed the pen to the paper, signing his name with deliberate precision. The moment the ink dried, David Whitmore extended his hand once more. "Congratulations, Mr. Cole. It's officially yours." Nathan shook his hand firmly, but there was no celebration in his eyes. He had waited years for this moment, imagined it 1,000 times when he was sleeping on park benches, dreaming of the day he'd rise above it all. But now that the deal was sealed, he felt nothing but cold determination. David, sensing the gravity of the moment, sat back in his chair. "You do realize what this means, don't you? The media is going to explode when they find out. This isn't just a purchase, it's a statement." Nathan's gaze was distant, as if he were looking far beyond the Manhattan skyline. That's the point. 2 hours later, the news broke like wildfire. Billionaire Nathan Cole makes first purchase, shocks the nation. The headlines flashed across every major news outlet. Financial analysts scrambled to make sense of it. Social media went into a frenzy, with theories swirling about his motivation. Nathan Cole had just bought the very shelter where he once lived as a homeless man. Not to demolish it, not to turn it into luxury condos, but to rebuild it, on a scale no one had ever imagined. Journalists dug up his past, piecing together the story that had remained largely unknown. Once upon a time, Nathan had been just another statistic, a man who had fallen through society's cracks, left to fend for himself on the unforgiving streets. He had spent months at that shelter, enduring humiliation, hunger, and hopelessness. But it was also there that he had met an old librarian named Mr. Bauer, a volunteer who had given him a book on finance and investing. That single act of kindness had sparked something in Nathan, pushing him to educate himself, to claw his way out of the darkness. And now he was coming back, not as a man in need, but as a man with power. Nathan watched the news coverage from the penthouse suite of a hotel, his face expressionless. Across the screen, financial experts debated whether this was an emotional decision or a calculated move. They didn't understand. This was more than a purchase. This was redemption. The next morning, a crowd had already gathered in front of the shelter, reporters and onlookers buzzing with curiosity. Nathan arrived in a sleek black SUV, stepping out in a crisp tailored suit, a stark contrast to the ragged clothes he had worn when he first arrived at this very spot years ago. Microphones were shoved toward him, cameras flashing. "Mr. Cole, why did you buy this place?" a reporter shouted. Nathan's expression was calm, his voice steady. "Because no one should ever feel as forgotten as I once did." Gasps rippled through the crowd. He wasn't done yet. Nathan took a slow breath, letting the weight of his words settle over the crowd. The reporters had expected a flashy purchase, a sports team, a tech empire, maybe even a private island. But this was something else entirely. A journalist from the New York Times pressed forward. "Mr. Cole, are you saying you plan to operate this shelter yourself?" Nathan's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. "Not quite. I plan to transform it. This won't just be a shelter. It'll be the most advanced rehabilitation and support center for the homeless that this country has ever seen." Murmurs rippled through the press. "You mean like a charity?" another reporter asked skeptically. Nathan met the man's gaze. "No, I mean a system, a real one. Shelters are Band-Aids. They give people a place to sleep for a night, maybe a meal, but they don't fix the problem. I'm building a place that will." Cameras flashed as the details started to sink in. Nathan turned toward the shelter behind him, a weathered brick building with peeling paint and rusted metal framing. He knew every inch of it. The smell of stale air, the creak of the beds, the way the flickering lights made the whole place feel like a forgotten relic. Not for long. "I'm investing $100 million into this facility," Nathan continued, his voice unwavering. "It will have state-of-the-art job training, mental health counseling, financial literacy programs, real pathways for people to rebuild their lives, not just a cot for the night." A gasp rippled through the crowd. $100 million. A younger journalist, her voice barely above the murmurs, asked, "Why this place? Why not start fresh, somewhere else?" Nathan exhaled, glancing back at the building one last time before turning his gaze to the crowd. "Because this is where I was saved, and now it's my turn to return the favor." The weight of his words settled over the crowd like a tidal wave. 12 hours later, the world had its answer. The story was everywhere. Nathan Cole's shocking first purchase, a revolution for the homeless. Talk show hosts debated whether he was a philanthropist or a radical businessman. Some financial moguls scoffed at the move, calling it an emotional whim, while others hailed it as visionary. Nathan didn't care about the opinions. He had a mission. He spent the next few days in meetings with architects, program directors, and city officials. The shelter's renovation wouldn't be just about aesthetics. It was about building a system that worked. His team was already assembling experts from various industries. And this was only the beginning. Standing on the rooftop of his hotel that night, overlooking the glowing skyline of the city that had once ignored him, Nathan smiled to himself. Let them talk. The world hadn't seen anything yet. 1 month later, the old shelter was gone. In its place, a massive construction project had begun, with towering cranes, cement trucks, and teams of workers transforming the once-forgotten building into something the city had never seen before. Nathan stood at the site entrance, watching the progress unfold. He had spared no expense. Every inch of this facility would be designed for real, long-term solutions. There would be classrooms for financial education, trade workshops, therapy rooms, and transitional housing for those truly ready to take their next step. And this was just the beginning. Nathan. He turned to see an older man approaching, his face lined with age but his eyes still sharp. Mr. Bauer. Nathan's chest tightened at the sight of the man who had once handed him that finance book. The single act of kindness that had started everything. Nathan extended a hand, but Mr. Bauer pulled him into a firm hug instead. I saw the news, the older man said, his voice thick with emotion. You really did it. Nathan pulled back, nodding. And I want you to help me run it. Mr. Bauer's eyebrows shot up. Me? You were the first person who believed in me, Nathan said. You gave me the tools to change my life. Now I need you to help me do the same for others. For a moment, the old man just stared at him, as if trying to decide whether this was real. Then slowly, he smiled. I'd be honored. 6 months later, the grand opening of the Cole Center for Renewal was unlike anything the city had ever seen. Celebrities, politicians, and business leaders filled the audience, eager to witness the moment firsthand. News stations broadcasted the event live, calling it the most ambitious homeless rehabilitation project in U.S. history. Nathan stood on the stage, microphone in hand, looking out at the thousands gathered before him. When I was homeless, I slept in front of this very building, he said, his voice steady. I remember the way people looked at me, or didn't look at me at all. The crowd was silent. I told myself that if I ever got out, I would never forget where I came from, and I haven't. He gestured to the towering facility behind him. This isn't a shelter, it's a second chance, a real one. Applause erupted. Nathan stepped back, letting the moment sink in. The boy who had once slept in the streets was now a billionaire, and his first purchase? Not a mansion, not a yacht, but a future for those the world had forgotten, and the world would never forget him again. Nathan Cole could have spent his fortune on anything, yet he chose to invest in something far greater than himself. He proved that real success isn't just about what you gain, but about how you give back. This story is a powerful reminder that no matter how high you rise, you should never forget where you came from. True wealth isn't measured by money. It's measured by the impact you leave behind. If there's one lesson to take away, it's this. Kindness, opportunity, and second chances can change lives. And sometimes, the best way to move forward is by reaching back to help others. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notification to be the first to know when interesting and lesson-packed stories like this one drop.